Yo, what's good, fam? It's On My X, episode 3. I'm Justin Joseph, a.k.a. 100JJX. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Faisal Khan, a.k.a. Goofy. Say what's up to the people.
What's going on, everybody? Watching episode 3 of On My X. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we're excited to bring you a brand new episode.
And I'm also joined by the man himself, as usual, Wes Price. He's a national champion. He's clutch. He goes by Clutch. What's good, bro?
What's going on? Episode 3, third time's the charm. And I can't be more excited to get this underway.
Let's go. Let's go. We just got done all day basically watching the first day of the MCC Pro Series. The Open Cup happened today. We wanted to jump right in and give you guys our thoughts. We're excited about it. So, Faisal, why don't you take us through what we just saw, man?
Yeah, like Justin was saying, everyone, we just got done watching the MCC Pro Series. Well, it was an open tournament for the Pro Cup next weekend, and we saw 8 phenomenal teams battle it out in a tournament of, I believe, there was a total of 88 teams, so almost 90 teams competed in this tournament this weekend, and these are the 8 that qualified. Going down the list, starting with your winners and champions. Team All Natural. These guys surprised the hell out of me. I'm not going to lie. They played phenomenally this entire day, beating some of the, Halo legends along their victory. Their roster, obviously, shout out to these guys, Haynes, Common, Saintly, and World Famous. These guys were on fire all day. Moving down the list, BTH, your runner-ups, Believe the Hype. These guys did a great job as well, locking down second place. Going down the list here, Status Quo and Burger Town 3rd and 4th, and then your 5th and 8th place teams, Rated R, Omega, Legendary, Rep 5, and Waste of a Seed. So, Wes, I'm going to pass it on over to you. Just break down what you thought about the tournament today, and all the phenomenal matches that we saw throughout this day.
Yeah, I think if you're not talking about All Natural, you're doing a disservice to how hard these guys have worked, and for them to get the success that they've got today. You got to boast about him, right? I mean, Saintly is a guy that used to throw lands at his house in Memphis, and he was the only guy willing to do it back in the day. And I would show up, and to be honest, he was solid back then, but I never thought he would get this far. So I want to give him a personal shout out for all the hard work that he's put in. But on top of that, those guys, all of them, like you talk about Common, World Famous, I mean, they've all been in the playlist just grinding so much and putting in the work that it takes to get to this point and to really have success. So couldn't be more excited for those guys. Love the fact that they were putting on a show today and they ended up coming in first, but it breaks my heart that they had to do it against my guys on BTH.
Tough one. That was a tough one. It was a hard-fought series.
Absolutely. Game 5, 50-48. Maniac, you need to be playing at the start of Game 5. You need to sit down in your chair.
That was crazy.
Very important factor.
That's crazy.
But, it's all to qualify for the Pro Series, which they did get that job done. So I'm looking forward to both those teams personally moving forward. You have teams like Status Quo with Roy and Flame that are going to be just a little bit sharper next week, I would expect, with a little bit more time on their hands to be able to put on a little bit more practice. So potentially they could create some upsets if they can sharpen up their skills a little bit more before that weekend starts. But those are really the 3 teams I think that really stick out to me. NYC and Munoz doing their thing, getting 4th, and well-deserved from them because you know that they're good players themselves. What about you, Justin?
Yeah, man, I think this is like that tried and true statement where it's, what is it, hard work beats skill when skill isn't practice. Like, we've seen this All Natural team put in some work, man. I'm pretty sure there was no hours of the day where you could search where some of these dudes weren't searching, matchmaking, and playing together and grinding. So I love to see the guys that put in the effort, put in the work, really have some success. And I know for Chris Common, he's been trying to break through and beat some of the top players for a long time, has been falling short. So to see them get that win under their belt is awesome. And also too, I think them winning this tournament kind of puts them on the radar in terms of maybe they'll get some better scrims, this week. Possibly some of the top teams will hit them up to practice. So they're only going to get better. And I was mentioning with Clutch when we were on the Discord call watching through the series, some of their series earlier, I was like, I got to see a lot of their progression, from when Halo 3 first dropped on PC. They were having a rough time against a lot of the pros, but they kept at it. They didn't quit. They didn't back down. They kept matching them, kept playing against them, and little by little, we saw them taking more and more games and play better and better. So I'm really excited and happy to see them win. It was funny to watch them obviously play BTH in the finals and just being in that call with you guys and seeing you guys reacting. We were going nuts for all the plays on both sides. Shelly going crazy and those guys. So In my opinion, like looking into the Pro Cup next weekend, my first question that I ask myself is like, I look at the top 8 here and I'm like, do any of these teams have a chance at making it through the group play, making it into the bracket play, which is the biggest picture, right? And for me personally, I feel like anyone in the top 4 of these qualified teams, I see, a couple of these teams possibly making it through that group play. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so as far as teams that qualified today making it into group play, I could definitely see, you said 4 teams, I would say 3. The top 3 I could definitely see causing some of the pro roster some trouble, because you got essentially what I would consider pro players spread across at least the second and third place team, and now all natural beating them both. So definitely one of those top 3 teams can ruffle some feathers in the Pro Series next weekend. But just talking about All Natural really quick, these guys really showed me something that I didn't know they had before today, and that's resilience. They were down in the grand finals 2-1 against veteran seasoned players, right? BTH, you guys know who's on that roster. You got Neighbor, Maniac, Shelly, and Aries Carries. 4 players that we all know, we all love, names that are, like I said, veterans in the Halo community. And, a roster like All Natural in the grand finals, I don't think they've ever been in a finals before. Down 2-1, backs against the wall. These guys win a tight game 4 and then win a nail biter game 5 Team Slayer game. So props to that All Natural team, showing me that they have resilience and that they have what it takes to, really take that next step into, that pro standing or into that, top discussion. So really impressed by those guys. And obviously we talked about the rest of the qualified teams as well. Congratulations to them. But going into the Pro Series next weekend, I'm really looking at, the same teams the same team, I should say, that we've seen dominate. And ever since we've been doing the MCC Pro Series, which is, I know it was Halo 2 Anniversary before, which is a different game, but we've only had one champion, and that's Sentinels, right? These guys are undefeated. They are the roster to beat. So at the end of the day, going into, and I want to talk about that a little bit more, guys, going into the Pro Series, do you think that any roster can give Sentinels a run for their money? And I want to touch on this really quickly, or do you think it's kind of a lock for Sentinels once again? It's kind of hard for me to bet against Sentinels, and especially with some of these rosters right now, where most of them, it seems like they're forming for Infinite or they're forming for later Halos. Like you look at Eco Smith, right? His team, although they did play today and they did qualify, they're not really built for a Halo 3 championship, I wouldn't say. So do you think going into the Pro Series, there's going to be any upsets, or are you guys just thinking Sentinels are going to business as usual?
I think there's 3 teams that come to mind when I try and think of who has really the potential to win this thing. I think Sentinels is your number 1 team coming in, and we don't even know who their 4th is, right? Like APG, no longer on the team, could be playing the MCC Pro Series with those guys because he's so close with them, and I'm not sure that their 4th is going to be announced by that time. That being said, I think you always have to give them the respect that they deserve and that they've kind of earned over the past, decade of Halo. And that's got to be a champ at the title. And that you don't see them really playing a whole ton together, but Lethal, Snakebite, Rule 2, the crew is going to be ready to gun whenever given the opportunity. So no doubt in my mind that they'll be somewhere up there at the top. Ryan Noob's team has been putting in a lot of work, and you have to respect him as well, especially with the addition of Gilkey, somebody, Faisal, you team with him, what he's capable of, especially in the big, at a tournament atmosphere. I mean, he went off when he teamed with you. He's been going off in the playlist when he plays with them. So I love the addition of Gilkey for this Halo 3 MCC Pro Series from that roster. I think he brings a lot of slaying power that they have needed. And that with that opportunity, I think that Ryan Noob, Brain, and King Nick can really progress and have a lot of success. And then the 3rd team that I really think, I'm not even sure what combination of players is going to be the team for next weekend, but you got to bring up Sab, Fallicated,
Booba
Dubu, and Falcated, whoever the 2 people that they team with, they're going to be a threat. Those guys have been playing with a combination of like Ace, Spartan, Sab, just a couple of other players, Tusk. Like whatever team they put together is going to be viewed as a threat and is going to have the capability of winning the whole thing based off just like their individual skill. Playing them in a playlist like continuously over the past couple of weeks has really been telling to me about how they are as players and how good they are and talented they are. So I want to leave the door open for them to take the whole thing. You'd love to see a team like All Natural come out and really compete against those guys. I just don't know if they have the individual skill when it comes to those three teams specifically. But everybody else, it's kind of like it's a free-for-all when going down at the third.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's gonna be interesting for me to see, like, can Ryan Noob win a chip without Faisal? I don't know. Like, we're gonna have to find out. You know,
he's won multiple chips without me.
But I'm saying in Halo, I meant like a Halo 3 chip. You know, can he get the Halo 3 chip without Faisal? Yeah, obviously he's won without you.
I don't think he's asking himself that.
Yeah, because the last time we saw him holding up a trophy, Goofy was right there. You know, putting in that work. But
very true, and Gilkey was there too.
I was going to say so was Gilkey.
Yeah, true. So they have half of that roster that won that Atlantic City tournament. So that's going to be cool to see how the new pieces, how Rain fits in, how King Nick fits in. Like, let's see if they can get back to the top, you know. And I think Wesley put it perfectly, where there are those three teams that have kind of separated themselves in terms of groups of players. So I'm really, really excited. I think next week this pro series is going to be a lot of fun. Really excited because we get to watch the journey, right? The qualified teams that just put in all that work. We get to see, you know, the teams that are going to take it to the next level in their work ethic. You know, this week I think is going to be huge for a lot of these qualified teams to, you know, really establish even more teamwork, to put together even more strats. They're going to have to bring their absolute best game. I know all of us can say that we saw some sketchy Halo at times today. You know, we saw some people getting away with stuff that wouldn't necessarily fly in the Pro Series. So we got to have that all tightened up, all ready to go for next weekend.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I think you said it. I think we said it perfectly. Just super excited to watch. At the end of the day, for me, I'm a Halo 3 diehard fan at heart. The Halo 3 is a game that really got me super invested in the Halo franchise, I guess. That was the game where, you know, I never owned an Xbox growing up, so I never got to play Halo 2, unfortunately. And Halo 3 was that first game that I grinded. So having it back, you know, involved with HCS again, and having it on the Pro Series today, and going into the, you know, next weekend with all the top teams competing, just super excited for the competition that we're going to get to witness, and some of the crazy matches that I'm expecting. So you know, thanks again to HCS for putting together these Pro Series, and just, you know, we're going to see Sentinels once again and get to see their dominance next weekend, see what they can do.
So there's a lot of great players playing next weekend. There's a lot of great teams, or there's a few great teams playing next weekend, I'll say. But this brings us to our next topic, guys. It's going to be, who is the greatest team of all time? And this is a longevity question to me. All right, this can't be, yeah, you were great this MCC Pro Series. You were great today. You were great that one weekend. Now, this is who is the greatest of all time? So, Justin, I'm going to pass this over to you to start this topic off, and you better come at it with a good answer.
Oh, man, I'm a little biased in this answer for sure. I'm a bit of an old head myself. Halo 2, you know, Faisal mentioned Halo 3 was his game. Halo 2 was that for me. That was my game growing up. So immediately when I think greatest team of all time, it has to be Final Boss 2007, Ogre 1, Ogre 2, Walshy, and Strongside. And I'll give you guys a good reason why, right? I'm not just going to throw that out there and expect you guys to accept it. But for me personally, with how long I've been competing, I actually have had the pleasure and the honor, honestly, of getting to play in a tournament against Final Boss 2007. I've played in a tournament against Tox, Sentinels, CLG. I've played all their different versions at an event. And for me, the reason why Final Boss stands out to me as the greatest team of all time, from my experience of playing all of them, is A, I've never felt that level of dominance ever, period. But B, I'll give you guys a short story. So Dallas 2007 was my first time ever making pro bracket ever. They're calling all the teams off for pro bracket, and you know, all the teams being named. We don't hear our team name. At the very end, we hear, and now we need Final Boss versus Chasing Victory to the main stage. And it was like my first event making pro, my second event ever. We're under the bleachers. We're getting announced. You know, Farouk brings us all out, whatever. We sit down to play. I'll never forget this. We were an AM team. No seed. We're the 32nd seed in pro bracket. We sit down. We're playing Final Boss, legendary roster, nothing but tournament wins. And I'm sitting on the close to the end where I can like look over and see them, and they're going like full bore, full hard, yelling call outs, screaming at us when like we're nobodies. We pose no threat whatsoever, but they went they gave it 110%, and that was just their work ethic. It didn't matter who they were playing. They were always going 110%. And let me tell you right now, we felt that dominance, and nothing is compared to that experience in terms of teams. And I mean, granted, I was barely coming up. I was an AM, whatever. But that experience, and then seeing their work ethic and seeing what they did, winning the national championship 2007 without dropping a game, for me, in my head, that solidifies them as the greatest team of all time.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And it was one that I was going to pick, but I think it's a great answer because you can't go wrong with it, right? Final Boss, that roster is legendary. Their logo is legendary. Their team name is legendary. Everyone on that team, their aura is legendary, right? So they are a great pick for the answer here with this question, who is the greatest Halo team of all time? But for me, so what I took into consideration for my answer is the amount of competition and how hard the competition has gotten over the years, right? So obviously the argument can be made anyway. You got to compare era to era, like even in any sport, right? That's why with the Michael Jordan, LeBron James discussion, people find it hard to debate sometimes because of how different the eras were. But in my opinion, competition has only gotten better as time has went on, right? Before, people used to call out at tournaments, just screaming call outs. They didn't even have headphones in their ears, right? So it's so much has changed and the game has evolved. So to be the best of the best nowadays, I just think it's harder in a different way, I guess. Okay. And I think that way is more impressive personally. So for that reason, I think the greatest Halo team of all time was that Optic Gaming / Tox roster of Royal 2, Snakebite, Lethal, and Frosty. That was obviously when Halo 5, your world champions. The dominance of that team throughout the high top competition in Halo 5 was so impressive. Frosty really just blowing up as far as being a household name in esports, not even in just Halo, but just in esports, everyone recognizing his dominance. Then you have, Royal 2 on just blaming, sniping everything in his sights, and Snakebite in Lethal obviously filling in more than they're needed in every which way. So I think the way that that Tox / Optic Gaming roster just dominated such a highly competitive game with such consistency really made them the answer for me with this question. And that roster, I think, just stapled themselves as a historic, legendary Halo roster that did stuff that no other team in Halo's history has done. Like I said, they dominated the competition, and in today's Halo scene, I think that's extremely impressive.
Yeah, I feel the energy from the Final Boss roster, right? I played them at the first event in 2008 of Halo 3, and same situation for me, Hunter. First time in pro bracket, first time on main stage, first time getting 3-0'd in 15 minutes. What felt like was my 15 minutes of fame at the time was very short-lived, and had a lot of spawn kills involved on the pit. I just remember just an overwhelmingly powerhouse of Final Boss. But you got to go with Faisal here. Like, Faisal, I don't know if you purposely left CLG out. But
honestly, yeah, CLG, Sentinels, Tox, Optic.
Yeah. I'm just giving you a hard time because I was on that CLG roster.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And like, I'm kind of biased because I was a part of it, I guess. But I'm also very aware of the greatness that I was able to witness.
Insane.
Those guys, I've never seen, like, I would get on to coach them in scrims and just know that the scrim result was an 11-0 before, like, we even started playing, right? Like, if teams took games from us, it was a shock. Like, there was a problem. Somebody messed up really bad in those games.
Or y'all were just trolling. Like, or y'all were just like, not,
he was just complaining, like, he's just in one of his moods because he didn't get dinner on time or something. Like, it was past his bedtime or something. Like, something ridiculous would have to happen. Like, I had never seen a team so dominant, personally. And I've been around since 2007. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I wasn't very good back then, but like, I was still aware of how great Final Boss was. And that is the only other acceptable answer to this question. But to me, like, seeing those Tox guys play, like, it's just incredible. And then to me, if you want to really answer this, you break it down as the individual players on this team. And to Faisal's point, players nowadays have gotten unbelievably, immensely, exponentially better. than what they were back in 2007. I mean, you take into account headphones and communication and small talk and the pace of play and reaction times and kids that have grown up with controllers in their hands at this point. Just everything that comes into account, technology getting like as great as it's gotten has given the platform for these players to allow them to excel at such a high rate. But break down the players on the team. Like Lethal and Snakebite are arguably the worst two players on this team, and they are two of the top, I would say, 6 greatest players of all time. Like roll to when you look back at Final Boss and you say, yeah, they had Ogre 2 and he was like the greatest Halo 2 player of all time. Fact. Ogre 1 was great. Walsh was, I mean, that whole team was great, but they were not doing things that even Lethal and Snakebite are capable of doing. Like the plays that they can make as individuals makes them by far the greatest team of all time to me. Their dominant run over not only Halo 5 at this point, but H2A, Halo 3, Halo Reach. I mean, like, what can't this team do? And for anyone that thinks it's about to stop before Infinite starts, like, wake up. Like, these guys aren't going anywhere, and they are a serious problem to all of the competition and have been for almost a decade, it feels like.
Yeah, I feel like. Yeah, go ahead, Faisal.
Just really quick, I was gonna say I think that's a great point that I didn't even stress enough when I picked them as my answer as well. Is that the fact that they've done it on top of doing it at such an amazing scale in Halo 5, the fact that they've done it in multiple different Halo titles, especially with these Pro Series, you see their dominance just stays constant no matter the game they play. That really elevates them that extra notch even more, obviously considering all the points that we said. And another thing you said, Wes, was that arguably, Snakebite and Lethal are the worst two players. I think that is very arguable because, I mean, I think a lot of people say Snakebite is their best player, and obviously you have royalty. Yeah, so it's crazy because you really can't even say, oh, he's probably their weakest link because they're all so immensely talented with what they do, right? So yeah, and all the points you made were great, and I agree with it ultimately. I
do want to give a shout out to APG though. I think that given the situation that he was in with his time on Tox and Sentinels, he elevated his play to that caliber that they needed him to, and continued the legacy of that dynasty. And I think that we will always remember that team to be Frosty, Snakebite, Roll 2, and Lethal. But in my eyes, they have a 5th teammate, and that's APG. And the success that they had with him as well shows how long this dynasty and how great this dynasty is that even over 2 players they were able to have unbelievable success against the competition at hand.
Yeah, I think no one's gonna try to take away what that team has done, and yeah, I think it's great to give a shout out to APG because he really did fill that spot and kept the tradition of winning alive in that team. I think when Infinite comes out, the reign of terror is going to continue. I don't think we're going to see them falling off anytime soon. They're all still very much in their primes, doing things they've never done before, playing better than they ever have. But I can't put them over that 07 Final Boss team for the same reason I can't put LeBron over Michael or Kobe over Michael, because of the fact that Michael did it first and FB did it first. I don't think without the culture of dominance,
without the culture of who did it best.
No.
Just because they're
hear me out. Without that culture of dominance and that work ethic and showing what it would take to be a champion, I don't think we end up with teams like Tox without the inspiration that comes from growing up. Snakebite came up in the scene, seeing Final Boss, seeing what they were doing, trying to emulate that, trying to get to that level. And without that, I don't see them having that success.
I don't like that.
That's that's like using an analogy to say the Steelers back in the 70s were greater than the Patriots are, their dynasty run in these late teens and whatnot, just because they did it in the 70s.
Yeah, I'm not saying just because they were first.
It's hard to compare it, and I know we say it on the surface a lot, oh, you have your LeBron and your Jordans, but it's hard to kind of compare because LeBron is 3-6, Jordan's 6-0. That's ultimately why people say that he's the GOAT. I mean, in terms of winning, this roster, the Royal 2 Snakebite Fry, they've won just as much. I mean, maybe, I don't know the exact number of tournaments, but in terms of like people's heads, when they think of those two teams, they don't think one of them's kind of like a losing record and one of them's like the all-time winningest record, you know? So that's why that comparison is kind of hard with the LeBron Jordan. But I see what you're saying with they did it first. They really created this aura of dominance before anyone else. But I disagree with it, because just because they created that aura or that dominant performance first doesn't mean people that came on after them and maybe did it a lot better. Not saying that, you know, this roster did it a lot better, but if there can be room for another team to kind of be to overcome that roster just because they did it.
I mean, does Optic have a flawless national championship though? I mean, do they have a national championship with no losses?
Royal 2 was literally in diapers, like when that was happening. That literally doesn't count. Like, I mean, like, you can't hold that against him that he was born after. And what they had a flawless, like, how many tournaments have they won without, like? I mean, a game competition is so much greater nowadays than it was back then.
That's the big thing,
I don't think anyone's going to debate that players are better or anything like that, but to say that the competition itself was less, because I would say there were still teams contesting, right? Like, you still had your Carbon, you still had Straight Ripping, you still had, you know, you still had 5K, you still had all these teams competing at that level. So just because players nowadays are better, which in every sport players get better as time goes on, doesn't mean they didn't have as much competition, because everyone was playing at that level back then. You know what I mean?
I agree with that point. I agree with that point.
Just because competition is higher. So, like, I think, like, yes, weighing that factor in, like, yes, breaking down, like, not just because, like, there's so many teams or whatever. I actually think that individuals are better now. And that they're still able to dominate those individual better players is the volume that's spoken.
They are. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying individual players themselves are much better now than they ever have been by far. Like Halo players today understand the game to a deeper level. Their shots are better individually. They've just progressed because through time everyone improves, right? But what I'm saying is, like, when you look at the competition, it's not like it was Final Boss and the rest of the field. It was that 2007 year was a very hotly contested year. There were lots of other good teams. Whereas, like, with CLG, and maybe this is a testament to their dominance, but I feel like early on in Halo 5, when they won that first Worlds, I felt like it was them and there was no other competition. It was like them in their own playing field. And that's like I said, that's testament to how good they were, but the competition was not really there for them, so to speak. Like, they were just dominating everyone and completely crushing.
That's because of their greatness. Like, it's not like the competition wasn't good. It's because they were great. Like, the competition was good. Like,
I think by the time that roster started dominating, Halo had already had such a deep history that you can't even use the excuse of, like, well, they were just dominating, so no one else was really as good as them. I think that just shows how good they were, and if anything, that argument could elevate their status even more, because you know, it's not like it's early Halo 2 where people are still kind of figuring out about competitive gaming and competitive Halo, and obviously you can't, you know, all these Carbon and all these rosters were not in that boat because they were super competitive. But by the time Halo 5 is out, everyone knows what's on the line and what's at stake, and everyone's going their hardest, and with that thought of, like, so much money on the line too, right? Halo 5 had the prize pool compared to any other Halo, and Halo 5 was ridiculous. There's so much money on the line, so literally inflated. Millions of dollars. So think about just kind of seclude or isolating that reason for yourself. How much money is on the line? You know, everyone's going super hard trying to become the best they could be, and still this roster is like 11-0, 11-0, 11. Like, people are trying to make their livelihood right now, you know, and everyone's going as hard as they can. They're not just doing it as a fun hobby. Oh, I play Halo competitively. They're doing it on some, like, yo, we need to set up our life right now, you know, like, we're trying to win millions. So that's what's at stake, and these guys are that dominant. It's like, okay.
In an era where Halo was taken as serious as ever, where people were scrimming as much as possible, people were grinding as much as possible, it was advanced as much as possible, like, small talk and communication had become even more important. Like, this team was able to separate themselves from the pack at a greater extent than any team that I think I've ever seen.
I don't think you can say people were taking it more serious, though. I mean, MLG was... we were on TV, you know, it was
$1 million
ESPN was coming. I know the money is there, but I'm saying, like, to say people didn't take it seriously is just ridiculous. Like, people would bend over backwards to get to Atlanta with FB back then.
You didn't know how to take it serious back then. Like, you weren't professionals back then. Like, you literally had T-Squared, like, threatening people's mothers or whatever he was doing, like after a free for all or whatever. And I'm not trying to like obviously that was a joke. Like,
stupid.
Like that was like ridiculous things were happening by the top players back then. Like the level of professionalism, like how serious people took it, I would say was more than ever. Like there were like you were scrimming 6-7 days a week. You were like online grinding every day of the week as well. Like I'm not saying like obviously teams back then in Halo 3 that I was a part of were doing that, but like the level that it was done at just seems so much more professional, and for them to still be able to excel in that environment and separate themselves.
I think the reason
like people were leaving like their careers and taking time off and like taking semesters off school, and like there were pro players that were like, this is it, like this is gonna set me up. And I think and I kind of came up with that, or I've thought about that in the past, but as I was saying it was kind of just off the top of my head, and it made more and more sense. Like, man, there's millions at stake here. Everyone is taking this so as hard as you can, and Hunter, what you're saying, like everyone back in the day was taking it super competitive too, or taking it extremely serious. But I think, like to Wes's point, the fact that so much more was at stake these days, if anything, elevates the argument of how much people were devoting themselves to the game.
I think social media is kind of tainted our glasses a little bit about that though, because like nowadays everything is so far in the open with streams and with social media. We know who's scrimming when, we can see it, we can tune it, we can see the scores. Whereas like, I mean, back in like 2007, 2006, like FB was literally hosting like secret LANs that you had to be invited to. Like no one talked about it. It was like Fight Club, first rules, you don't talk about Final Boss LAN, like, and they were going at it, and it was like people literally would do anything they could to try to get an invite just to be in Final Boss's presence to LAN, to get that practice, because they were at that level and they were the bar. And to go into that, like I said, go ahead, Wes. Sorry. Yeah. No,
I love that point, and I 100% agree with that point. But there were a very few select teams that were doing that. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, you have even the top 32 teams are online 5 days a week scrimming best of 11s against each other, right? Like nowadays, everyone's putting in that kind of practice. It's not just your top 3. It's not just your top 8. Like, yeah, in 2009, 10, and 11, like we had 6-team LANs where like the top 6 would go to those things, and we duke it out, and we played like 55 games in a night. Like and whatnot, and those were hyper competitive, but that also didn't leave a lot of room for like the top 12 teams or the top 16 teams or 32 teams to kind of like be even able to keep up with us, right? Like nowadays, like especially when Halo 5 came out, it felt like with that much money on the line, you had all of these teams putting in that required amount of time, and that's another reason like to just give the notch over to the team that came out with the most success during that time period.
I feel like to say one team, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Faisal, but I feel like that one group of people had a better quality. Like the way I feel like you're putting it, Wes, is that like people just didn't care. They didn't take it seriously. They didn't practice as much. Whereas it's not that they didn't practice as much. They just didn't have that quality of practice, like you're saying, right? I mean, to say that like out of the 250 teams that were showing up to every event for Halo 2, that only 5 of them practiced properly is kind of like a disservice to the guys that were trying to hustle and make it happen. The problem was they just didn't have access, right? Like if you didn't have access to FB, you didn't have access to that inner circle, you were never going to be on that level. And it was very much a 5 or 6 team race, in Halo 2. But I would argue it's very much the same in Halo 5. It was pretty much only a 5. Besides, you have like it was a 5 or 6 team race, and everything else would obviously be in flux. But I mean, it's pretty much been that way for all of Halo, where you have tiers, right? And it's impossible to break through. Yeah. Like it's such a hard wall to break through each individual layer. Go ahead, Faisal.
Yeah, I like that point too. And again, I'm kind of just going off the top here, and it's not that my answer is engraved in stone. I think it is something that's up for debate, and with good points, you can obviously alter people's opinions, or I would hope so. But yeah, I mean, even like what we're saying, right? The competition was so much harder in Halo 5 is what we're saying. But when you think about it, back in the day, like late, towards the end of Halo 2 and early Halo 3, there were a lot more teams that competed in these tournaments. Like MLG would sell team passes that would sell out in like 5 minutes. Whereas in Halo 5, even though they are $1 million tournaments, there would be like 80, 120 teams or something. So I do think that there is some nuances that we didn't specifically touch on, but ultimately, that's why it's so hard to compare eras, because at the end of the day, it's the best playing against whoever else is the best, and they're trying to win. And if one team can dominate for a long period of time, that's amazing. Final Boss did that, and that this Tox or the Sentinels roster did that too. It's just about preference of those nuances, right? Preferences of breaking down the details and really dissecting it that way. So I honestly, both answers are great. And I stick to what I said to start my answer, which was I was going to go with Final Boss, but then I ended up picking this, the Snakebite Royal 2 Lethal and Frosty roster, just because of the, in my opinion, the stakes were higher when they were doing their dominant stuff.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think, just to reiterate some of that, growing up, Final Boss was just on a pedestal for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to even have the opportunity to play against those guys, and they were almost like the nostalgic dream of becoming something like that was what honestly drove me as a player to get to where I got, which wasn't even a piece of something that they were able to achieve. I think Tox has kind of replicated that for the newer generation, and I don't think that there's a wrong answer between the two. And I think I could only look forward to seeing maybe a potential third come up in Infinite, but
let's see it. Who is he going to be? Who's he going to be?
Yeah, I love you guys' points, and I would just say to the audience, to you guys, enjoy what you guys are witnessing right now, because this is generational
seriously.
talent. We've only seen two teams even be in this discussion in 20 years almost of Halo history, and Faisal, like you said, it's so hard to debate different eras. I think the fact of the matter is, if that 2007 Final Boss team beamed up to 2020 and played Tox, they would get absolutely just destroyed. And if Tox could somehow rewind time and play them back then, Royal 2 was in diapers, so they couldn't even play, so it's for those two different eras, they definitely owned the eras and dominated them. And and we want to know what you guys think. Who do you guys think is the greatest Halo team of all time? Excited to see in the Twitter comments as well as the YouTube comments. I'm gonna jump in. We're gonna jump into a brand new section, a brand new segment that we thought would be fun. We've been asking you guys on Twitter and on YouTube for ideas for different topics, and so I decided to pick one this week for the guys and us to kind of discuss and jump into. So this is one of the top liked comments on the Twitter post that we put out. It's from @TePhoenix. And this is the question that he asked. He said, with another potential 6 months plus of Halo 3 V9 potential. So, the question is, do you think we should start looking forward to, potentially moving on from the V8 settings that we've had for so long? And if so, what would you guys like to see? Let's start with you, Wes.
I would love to move on from the current settings that we have. If Halo 3 is another 6 months down the road of MCC Pro Series, right? I think everybody wants that. I think that there's a lot of things that have influenced the game types, as well as just staleness of repeatedly playing the same thing over and over, and that the scene needs something new. That being said, we need to see maps come into play, because we've probably tried over the years of Halo 3, we've probably tried a lot of the potential game types that could work on a lot of the Halo 3 maps that we've been given, and there's a reason why we're at where we're at with a lot of them. Even Heretic Oddball was something that I personally enjoyed, but there was a lot of pros in the scene that had issues with it, and it was removed. I think that it would really take a map or two to kind of change that. Now, do we want to go down the road of playing a bunch of Forge maps is a question. And me personally, I don't know if a bunch of Forge maps is exciting, but if you brought me something that I thought played at a high level, and brought competitive integrity with it, then I would love to see something out of the Forge community regarding some potential new game types and modes for Halo 3. What about you, Faisal?
Yeah, I'm probably in the minority here, but aside from definitely one game type, which is Construct Slayer, I think the other 10 game types that we're seeing in Halo 3 are great game types, and I think they're, in my opinion, legendary game types that play out so exciting in most scenarios when it's top teams against other top teams. Obviously, it's always great for the scene to kind of freshen things up and bring in new game types or maybe new maps. And don't get me wrong, if there was an option to bring in new non-forged maps, I would be all for it. Or maybe even maybe there could be some cool forge maps. I think it's one of those things where I'd have to see it to maybe change my mind on it. But as far as the 11 game types right now, aside from maybe removing a Construct Slayer and adding in another objective game type, like a midship ball, like you were saying, Wes, I don't know if that would work with how the series go now. Well, it's 2 best of 5, so maybe it would work. Yeah, I think the game types in Halo 3, and again, I'm probably biased. Halo 3 is my favorite Halo. I'm in my opinion, I think I'm pretty, I play a lot of Halo 3 even nowadays. Like I stream and I play at, just like you guys, I get in sweaty lobbies and I'll match other people, and I'm just so used to the game types and I think they've evolved so much that you see competitive Halo at such a high scale because everyone knows what the meta is, and it's like a game of chess at that point, not just like, oh, I know this spot that you don't know yet, so I'm gonna take advantage of it, or I know this angle, or our team knows this strat because it's so new. It's like everyone knows what's going on, and now it's like who can execute better. And for that reason, I personally like the 10 game types we have now, and I would definitely be open, and I would be happy if they swapped out Construct Slayer for something else. And me personally, I know I don't want to sound like I'm negating everything I said, but I'm only saying Construct because I know. Actually, no, I won't even say that. Construct needs to go. I was gonna say I like Construct Slayer, but I don't want to even say that. I do like Construct Slayer for the record, but it needs to go.
I like the point that you brought up about like the even playing field because these game types have been out for so long, so we're seeing them all being played at like the absolute highest level. But other than that, like I completely disagree with it. I say just change it all, man. Like let's get something fresh going. I'll throw some hot takes in there. Pit TS is trash. Like get that gone ASAP. I would say Slayers in general. Hot take. I don't like Slayers a lot. I would like to see. I'm one of those guys. I'm in that camp. Like I would like to see down the road maybe potentially limiting them down to 1 Slayer a series, game 5 only, if that, like just so we could see more of like the thing with Slayers for me is I feel like anybody can win them. They're not as like set in stone where the better team is always going to win, as opposed to game types we have to control more. But maybe that's what's exciting about them. But for me personally, like as a competitor, I always like kind of not dreaded, but I always was kind of like not looking forward to the Slayers in the series as much as I was like ready to jump into the more hard to control game types. And I feel like it could be fun. Like if we're gonna be playing Halo 3 for another potential 6 months, dude, like something's got to get fresh. I mean, we've been playing it, I've been streaming it every day, so maybe I'm biased. I've been streaming it every day 8 to 10 hours a day for like the last year and a half, so I'm like ready for something new.
We also have the Insider. I don't know how much we want to talk about that, but the new shot registration on the Insider in itself could be almost like it could change the meta, right? Yeah. Because in my honest opinion, the sniper rifles in the MCC PC are, and maybe it's just all in my head, but I swear I feel like the sniper is a lot more easier to use in the Halo 3 PC version. So it's kind of overpowered. And with the way the static spawns for the weapons you can't dirty the weapons anymore. So all snipers spawn at the same time, every game. And so there's so many snipers on the map. I think having the new shot registration in the Insider Halo can help with that issue because, having your BR shots hit more crispier can maybe negate some of the OP-ness of the sniper, right?
Yeah,
so I
think
having the Insider to look forward to almost maybe a breath of fresh air in itself. I don't know if you guys kind of agree with that.
Yeah, I think it definitely changes the meta and how a lot of these game types are going to be viewed and played. I think that MCC has kind of allowed a lot of what was slow-paced, structured gameplay to go into more of a fast-paced, like try and make a play gameplay that could be subsided with a little bit of shot registration involved. Like, for example, like a Guardian ball setup, very difficult to hold online on MCC. But
agreed.
Like on LAN, like you had to have like your P's and Q's together if you were going to try and break a setup against a team
get clamped up,
straight ripping or triggers down. Like you were not jumping top middle from gold, like thinking that you were going to win that one-on-one with the guy elbow because you were not winning that. So potentially, like we'll have to wait and see. I think, like to reiterate my point, as long as if we were able to find a map or a game mode that didn't interrupt the competitive integrity of what we're playing, then I'm all for it. But if it's just to have something new and the mode or map doesn't play well, then I'm not for it. So I don't want to force anything into a rotation just because it's new. I want to have something that's refreshing, but also pushes the levels of the competitive play higher, not lower.
I guess that's kind of where my answer stems from too, because the game types and maps we have now are tried and true.
Right.
We've seen the battles, we've seen like some of the crazy moments that have come from having these game types. That's probably why I'm clinging on to them. But by all means, I think bringing some new stuff in, especially for Halo and where we're at now, like we need exciting news. We need something new. So I'm all for it. Adding some new stuff and maybe tinkering with some of the maps and game types, but I also would not be opposed to keeping it how it is, man. Classic Halo 3.
Yeah. Go ahead, Wes.
I'm going to go ahead and say that a topic on our next show that will be discussed is should Slayer be removed from competitive Halo? Because that is a very highly contested topic. I've kind of, when I was a player, I argued one way when I kind of sat back and commentated and now like the analyst commentary role. I'll give you an answer of why I think as a player I was kind of wrong. But that being said, I kind of leave you with those 2 cents. And on that note, I'm going to call it a wrap up on episode 3. Gentlemen, it was fun today. We had some good times watching the AM Cup. And a big shout out to the team that won world famous Saintly, Common. You guys played out of your minds.
Haynes, don't forget Haynes.
Haynes, sorry. You guys all played out of your minds. Well-deserved win today, but I hope you have your eyes focused on the big picture, which is going to be next weekend, the MCC Pro Series. But that's going to wrap it up here for episode 3. Justin, you want to leave your social media here for the guys?
As always, you guys can find me twitch.tv/Hunter_JJX, streaming every single day, bringing you guys that Halo content, as well as Twitter, Hunter_JJX. Faisal, what you got for the people?
Yeah, everyone, you could find me streaming every day as well at twitch.tv/Goofy. And you can follow me at Twitter if you'd like. My Twitter handle is Goofy with 2 G's. And like Wes was saying, guys, let us know in the comments section, who do you guys think is the greatest Halo team of all time? What topics you want to see us discuss in future shows. Every single Monday, we're going to be bringing you guys a brand new episode. And let us know who you think is going to win the Pro Series next weekend. Is Sentinels going to have another dominant performance, or are we going to see somebody give them a run for their money? And again, shout out to the team that won today, All Natural. You guys played amazing and showed me that you have resilience and you have what it takes to compete against the best.
Absolutely. To Faisal's point, we got a lot of action items for you guys. I want to see predictions on the MCC Pro Series. I want to see questions you guys want in our new segment of every show we're going to have every Monday. Your question could be talked about, could be the hot topic of the week. So make sure you leave us with something there. It's Wes. It's at Wes_Clutch on Twitter. It's in the Clutch on Twitch. And you guys have a good evening. Thank you for tuning in.
Peace.